Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, Consumer Reports has launched a new baby initiative which is aimed to help teach and inform parents about safety and care for their little ones. The manager of auto safety for Consumer Reports joins us via Skype to share all that they have learned about baby safety. Then RHOAR NYC was created in response to NYC restrictions on short-term rentals. A member for RHOAR NYC joins us to tell us why they are against Local Law 18. After that, as the city's affordability crisis worsens for nearly everyone, even upper middle class New Yorkers are struggling to pay for childcare. The chief of grant strategy for Robin Hood joins us to discuss what they are doing to help concerned parents. And finally, the Equitable Commute Project will support access to e-bikes for under-resourced communities in New York City. The sustainable mobility consultant for the Equitable Commute Project shares more about their organization's aim to help with e-bike trade-ins. So stay tuned. All this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello, everyone. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today is Tuesday, October 3rd. You are now watching Open, a program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. When preparing for a new baby, purchasing a car seat is just as important as finding the right stroller or crib. With the mission to help parents make the right choice for their infant, Consumer Reports launched the Car Finder tool and other initiatives aimed towards recommending baby-safe products. Dr. Emily Thomas, the manager of auto safety for Consumer Reports, joins me to discuss. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I really want to jump into talking about the new baby initiative from Consumer Reports. Can you just explain what was the reasoning or the inspiration behind this initiative?
We understand that there are so many decisions for parents to make, and it can be really overwhelming. Consumer Reports has been testing baby products for over 80 years, and so we are your trusted resource in being able to give you scientifically rigorous, independent ratings and recommendations that can help you make the best choices for your family.
Now, what is the free infant car seat finder?
We've created this great new tool. It's our infant car seat finder. It's free to use. And ultimately, what it does is it takes into consideration your lifestyle, your budget, the type of car that you have or perhaps don't have. And then it narrows down all of our infant car seat ratings into the choices that are best suited for your needs. And it provides you with those results. So it really helps parents in making this important decision and important first purchase for their child.
Now, you kind of touched on something that I thought was really interesting, and you said the car that you don't have. Why may this still be, something that parents who don't have cars or who rely on like the train to get around, why is this something that they may also want to look into?
All babies need to be brought home from the hospital with a appropriate car seat. So you're still going to need one when you bring the baby home. You also want to make sure that you have one for when you're using rideshare or you're carpooling with another family. Just because a car is not your primary mode of transportation doesn't mean that you won't ever need a car seat to transport your child. It's really important to make sure that whenever they're in a vehicle that they are properly restrained, because this is what gives them the best protection in the event of a crash.
Now, how will this tool, I was going to say help new parents, but how could this also help parents who are not new to this experience?
Car seat technology is always changing. There's new features out on the market. And so really it can be hard to know just based off of the manufacturer's marketing which is actually better and how does one seat differ from another. Our ratings are incorporated into the Finder tool. And so really you get the benefit of all of our testing and evaluations as experts in our field to help you in making this decision.
Now, what factors should parents consider when buying an infant car seat? And you talked about like when you do the test, there are certain things. So, what are some of the things that you're looking for as well to make sure that these are like really good car seats for parents?
We evaluate car seats in three main areas. So we look at ease of use. How easy is it to make the necessary adjustments and how to really use all the different components of the car seat itself. We also look for potential areas of misuse. How are the labels? How are the instructions that come in the owner's manual? Equipping the parents to use the product properly. We also look at what we call fit to vehicle, which is essentially how easy is it to get a secure installation in your car using either the vehicle door anchors or using the vehicle seat belts. And then last but certainly not least, we look at crash protection. All car seats that are sold in the US, they have to meet the minimum federal safety standard. However, our testing goes beyond the federal standard. We use a higher energy test and we use an environment that is more representative of a real vehicle today. And this allows us for tests for additional margins of safety that the car seat might be able to provide in the event of a crash. So when we put all of that together, it really helps parents to know as a whole, how does this one car seat compare to its peer that you're going to see there on the shelf?
And with so many different types of car seats, especially when you think about price, maybe parents may be familiar with a certain brand, how can they know what is right for their needs and also what is, safe for the baby?
The safest car seat is always going to be the one that fits your car and fits your child and you can use properly every single time. Sometimes parents think that an expensive car seat is going to be the safest option, and that's not necessarily true. In our testing, we've found that there are more inexpensive seats that perform really well for crash or do well in our fit to vehicle testing, perhaps even ease of use. A more expensive seat might give you additional features that could aid in making installation easier or make the seat easier to use, but it doesn't guarantee a safer seat. And really, that's the kind of thing that our ratings help to boil down for you. It's helping you kind of look past the noise of price and branding and marketing and determine what about the seat actually makes it better than its peers.
Now, how does this process change when your infant is no longer an infant and then they grow into a toddler? And even in some cases, I understand that children, like even 7-year-olds, can still use a car seat. So, how does this process change as the child gets older?
You're going to always want to take into consideration your child's age, their height, their weight when you're choosing the right car seat for them. We recommend, based off of our own crash testing, that babies move from an infant car seat to a rear-facing convertible no later than their first birthday. And really, what that allows is for them to continue to stay rear-facing, which is safest for them, but it also gives them added head protection. And whenever you're looking to make a transition, you don't want to transition your child too early, whether that's from rear-facing to forward-facing or harness to booster. You want to make sure that they have maxed out that phase's height or weight limit. So you want to use your rear-facing car seats up to the height or weight limit of the seat. You want to use their forward-facing harness up to the forward-facing height or weight limit of the seat before moving them to a booster where they're relying on the vehicle seatbelt. And yes, for most kids, they're not going to transition out of their booster until they're between the ages of 8 to 12 and approximately around 10 years old, really. And that's because you want to make sure that the vehicle seatbelts are fitting the child properly. And that means that the shoulder belt is going across their collarbone and across their chest. The lap belt is going across their hip bones, really hitting the strong, bony parts of their body. This also is dependent on their developmental readiness, their ability to sit through an entire car ride with their seatbelt on properly, not slouching, not moving the shoulder belt behind their back or under their arm. And so you have to really kind of gauge how well the seatbelt fits your child without the booster and whether or not they're really mature enough to be able to do this for every trip.
Now, that kind of leads into my next question. What are some common mistakes you see when parents are installing a new car seat? And then now, what we just discussed about, I had no idea, like, you had to think about all those different parts of your body when, using a seatbelt. What are some common mistakes that parents make? And then what can we do to avoid them?
Car seats are not always intuitive to use, and so there are a few common areas that we find misuse. So typically looking at how the car seat is installed to the vehicle, you want to make sure that you have a nice, tight, secure installation, which means that once you have used the lower anchor strap or you use the vehicle seatbelt to attach your car seat to the vehicle, you want to make sure that you have removed as much slack from the system as possible and you've gotten nice and tight so that when you go to grab that car seat at the belt path, you can't move it more than 1 inch side or front to back. And when you're doing seatbelt installation, always make sure that you are locking the vehicle seatbelt. So you do that by pulling the seatbelt all the way out of the retractor until you hear it click, and then it starts to ratchet in as it pulls in the additional slack from the system. You also want to make sure that you're using the correct belt path. So for older kids that are using cars that can be used in more than one configuration, like forward facing and rear facing, always make sure you're using the correct belt path for the orientation of the seats. When you are using rear facing car seats for children, you want to make sure that it's always installed with a proper recline. This is especially important for young babies because if the seat is too upright, what happens is that their heads fall forward and then they obstruct their own breathing. So you want to make sure that the recline is set properly for every ride. Over time, your car seat installation can loosen, so also make sure that you are checking the install to make sure that it's still nice and secure. The other main area that we see misuse is in how the child is secured within the car seat itself. So we're talking about making sure that the harness is at the appropriate height for your child. So if your child is rear facing, where the harness straps go over their shoulder into the car seat shell, you want to make sure that it's at or slightly below their shoulders if they're rear facing. If they're forward facing, it should be at or slightly above their shoulders. And you want to also make sure that the harness is tight enough for every single trip that if you go to pinch the harness webbing between your fingers at their shoulders, you're not able to get any webbing between your fingers. And lastly, make sure that chest clip is buckled up for every single ride and that it's up at armpit level, and this helps to keep the harness straps positioned over their shoulders. One additional thing for all forward-facing installations, it is strongly recommended to always attach the top tether. This is a tether strap that goes over your vehicle's seat back and attaches to a tether anchor. This really helps to reduce the forward motion of the car seat during a crash. And that combined with making sure you have a nice tight installation helps to make sure that the car seat is really getting integrated to the vehicle. And so that in the event of a crash, your child's not just benefiting from the crash protection design of their car seat itself, but also all the crash management systems of the vehicle as well.
So thank you so much for sharing that information. Are there like tutorials with the tool that they can like learn a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So if you go to our website, consumerreports.org/babies, you'll find tons of great ratings and advice for all of our baby products. You'll also find access to our free car seat ratings, not just for the infants, but across all of our categories. You'll be able to access the free infant car seat finder. And we have tons of free education and content with lots of visuals that help you know how to avoid common installation mistakes, how to properly harness your child, tons of great advice, and lots of resources for families.
All right. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for joining me and having this really informative conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open right after this.
Even though we didn't grow up together, he's my favorite brother.
Hey, sis.
I'm the baby of the family, and he's the gentle giant.
What you know about Port Georgia?
Man, please, that's a classic.
You know when they say people are a rare breed? Yeah, he's that.
I'm sorry, I'll be back in a few hours.
Don't worry, Shug. You know I'm for you.
I know.
Go get the football.
That was my favorite memory. He was always for you. This is a true story of me, Bridget Floyd, and this guy, George Perry Floyd Jr., my big brother.
Welcome back. New York City released a new law commonly referred to as Local Law 18 that requires short-term rental hosts on apps like Airbnb to register with the City of New York before they can accept any payments. In response to these new restrictions, many small homeowners are pushing back. Joining us to discuss the impact of this law on homeowners is Linda Ortiz, a member of the organization Restore Homeowner Autonomy and Rights. Linda, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for creating this opportunity for us.
Of course. So what is the overall mission and goal of your organization, RHOAR?
So, yes, our mission and goals is to make sure that our rights and autonomy are returned to one and two family homeowner-occupied homes, like the one that I own here in the Bronx. And so we are a coalition of homeowners that would like for,
It's okay, yeah. So, I mean, that was really great. So I want to talk about Local Law 18
Yes.
because I definitely want to make sure that your organization is not against Local Law 18, but you do have some things that was concerning to you. Can you just explain, how this new law affects small homeowners like yourself?
Yeah, sure. So Local Law 18 was drafted to deal with bad actors, people that were renting many apartments and putting them on the market for Airbnb in apartment buildings, multi-dwellings. And unfortunately, the impacts of LL18, the Local Law 18, is wrapping up one and two homeowners, one and two family homeowners within the legislation. And so hopefully we're seeking is that we get a carve out or an amendment modification to the legislation that's adversely impacting small homeowners in the intent of the original legislation.
Now, I'm curious to know, what are some reasons a homeowner may look into short-term rental business?
Sure. That's a great question. And I see it as not so much a business, but a way to survive. Costs of utilities have gone up. Insurance for homes, I don't know if you know, but they've tripled this year alone. And so it's a means of survival, just like any other New Yorker with the need for additional income would take advantage of. Yeah.
Now, what is the registration process like? Because as I mentioned that, a lot of these homeowners are now going to be required to register with the City of New York. What is that process like? And, could this be a challenge for some homeowners? Basically, what are some obstacles associated with registering if you are interested in the short term, rental area of, like, as you mentioned, trying to survive?
So the challenges in this, home sharing registration process with the City of New York is quite cumbersome. And so there's an agency we need to sign up, which is the Office of Special Enforcement. And it requires a lot of additional steps. So people say, well, if you're doing the right thing, just register. And that process may, at face value, appear super easy and accessible, but it's not. It creates a lot of hurdles for small homeowners that require meeting guidelines and certain laws created by Department of Buildings and the Housing Maintenance Code that we're not necessarily privy to. And so there's some hurdles that we need to go through in order to properly register with the city of New York.
Now, a representative from RHOAR said this law resulted in homeowners feeling as though they lost autonomy over their homes. Can you just expand why many homeowners are feeling this way? And of course, like, when you saw the news that this was something that was going to happen, how did that make you feel as well as a homeowner?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, there's obstacles to the registration process. And so while it seems clear and cut, once an individual, a homeowner, begins the process of registering, they find that their units do not qualify for participation in the home sharing economy because there have been changes to the city housing maintenance codes, changes to the Department of Buildings rules and regulations that often are done with little to no public hearings or public process. So we're finding out as we are taking these initial steps.
And then can you just talk about, I thought this was really, because, I never thought of it this way before as like a means to, possibly help with, owning a home in New York City is like a huge deal. And I know although it's a huge accomplishment, it can be stressful for a lot of homeowners. So you can just talk about that experience and, how maybe not having access to this, how is that going to affect the livelihood of so many of these homeowners?
Yeah, so homeownership is super diverse. It can be that you inherited the property from your parents. It can be that you bought a very, very long time ago, you raised your children, and now you're an empty nester. It could be that you are a divorcee and, you have the house and you're alone in the house. So the home sharing economy allows for people with single income, divorcees, widows, and folks that are retired to gain a little bit of income to keep living in New York. The old model was, well, after you hit 60, you retire, you sell your house, and you move out of state. Well, people are staying in New York. Their families are in New York. We're the fabric of this city. I don't want to sell my house because I can no longer afford to live in New York City when there are avenues where I can access additional income in order to be able to continue living in the city that I was born in.
Now, a major concern for your organization is that homeowners are facing the same role as large corporate landlords who have been associated with running illegal hotels. Can you expand on that concern?
I think that's where the waters get murky, right? Unlike building owners and big landlords, homeowners have one unit in their apartment, on their property, or a couple of rooms for home sharing. And so when this legislation began in September, this past couple of weeks ago, we certainly felt the impacts right away. For us, it's a means of survival. The difference between a multi-dwelling unit is apartments can stay empty and the landlord doesn't necessarily have to fill them, and nor does he feel the impact of the loss of income. Whereas in 1 and 2 family homes, we certainly feel the impact right away. And there are people who are scared to lose their homes in the next couple of months.
And I also want to kind of reiterate that when we speak to people who are like, oh, well, yeah, just, go through the process. It is very important to make the distinction between landlords who have multiple units.
Absolutely.
Versus a homeowner. So can you just kind of pinpoint that one more time, just to make that distinction and how it's not the same and how you guys are not affected the same?
Sure. So when landlords or people living in a residential building put their apartments on Airbnb, the landlord doesn't necessarily live there. The impacts of that apartment, either paying rent or not paying rent, is not as it's not as impactful as, let's say, a 1 or 2 family home.
Right.
So In my case, if my my tenant stopped paying rent, I would feel it in that following month when I would have to pay the utilities, gas, electric, water, and everything else associated with the expenses of the home. Yeah, and so we are being put in the same bucket, but we function very, very, very differently.
Now, can you, your organization is hoping to see new legislation to modify Local Law 18. So once again, you're not against it, but you just want to see it modified. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that effort?
Sure. So in terms of modification, we are asking for a full exempt of 1 and 2 family homes from Local Law 118. And why? Because we're not large buildings. We are not landlords. We are just small homeowners trying to make a living in New York City, like everything else. We are in agreement with Local Law 18 and the intent of the law. They are unscrupulous, bad actors who have taken advantage of housing in New York. We are not those. We are very careful in who we invite into our homes. Visitors and tourists are staying inside my home. And so, I'm inviting them into my community. And so I'm very careful on who I invite, and who I host. So I clearly understand why Local Law 18 was drafted and in complete agreement of again, its intent. But there has to be some sort of a critical lens on this and some analysis that 1 and 2 family occupied homeowners are not landlords and we are not buildings.
And, I really love that you you kind of talk about safety a little bit, because I know that was a concern for others. And, you mentioned it's in your home and you're bringing people into your community and you're mindful of that. Whereas I'm assuming maybe people who don't live in the community who own these buildings aren't thinking the same way you are thinking. So I think that was really important that you shared that, because I know a lot of people are probably thinking oh yeah, you're seeing new people in your neighborhood. And so if you're living with them for that short a period of time, you want to hope that you're safe as well. So I appreciate you talking about that.
Absolutely. So other than, inviting people, I want to curate an experience for them. And, frankly speaking, so my home in the Bronx, I'm a native Bronx girl, born and bred in the Bronx. And most tourists that come and visit New York, frankly speaking, Bronx is not part of the itinerary. Right? It's just, unless they're going to a game in Yankee Stadium or visiting the zoo. So when they do stay with me, they do ask, is it safe?
Right.
Yeah. And they walk away with, I'm coming back to the Bronx. This was an amazing experience. And so it adds to the fabric of our microeconomies within our neighborhoods.
Right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation.
Sure. Thank you.
To learn more about this or help support RHOAR NYC's fight, with Local Law 18, please go to their website at www.roar.org. Stay tuned. We have more open to you right after this.
Dear moms and dads, what you have achieved here today is going to help us and our futures. It is why we are coming up on stage to collect your diplomas.
It's true.
Mom, we love you always.
Everything I do.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Can you see anything different as a pill?
No.
You don't know?
Fentanyl is being mixed into everything now. There's only one thing that will save somebody's life. That is naloxone nasal spray.
Fentanyl, it's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
Why would drug dealers put a lethal dose of fentanyl in drugs if they know it's so harmful?
Really just all about the money.
I just didn't realize that one pill could change your whole life.
More kids should know.
Welcome back. The organization Robin Hood is taking steps to tackle the childcare affordability crisis in New York City through its Childcare Quality and Innovation Initiative. In partnership with Mayor Eric Adams' administration, they aim to improve the childcare system for families across all 5 boroughs. We have with us Sarah Oltmans, the Chief of Grant Strategy at Robin Hood, to discuss this initiative. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This is such an important issue, so I appreciate you highlighting that on your show.
Of course. So yes, I want to talk about, basically in New York City is going through a lot. But right now we're also experiencing an affordability crisis in various sectors, particularly in childcare. Can you just talk about why childcare expenses have been on the rise recently?
So you're absolutely right. We are having an affordability crisis. We're also having an accessibility crisis. And this is something that's been going on for a long time, but has been made a lot worse during the pandemic. In New York City, the demand for childcare far outstrips the supply. This is especially true for children and families who have children under the age of 3. So we see that can be just a real challenge, just being able to even find childcare. Raising New York did a poll, and they asked New Yorkers about childcare affordability, and they found that 2 in 5 families were not sending their children to childcare because they could not afford it. So affordability is a challenge as well. And sometimes childcare is really not even meeting the needs of families. Just to give you one example, only 5% of childcare sites are open between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. And that's when a lot of people are working in here in New York. So there's quite a few challenges right now with the childcare system. But at Robin Hood, we believe that childcare is just such an important issue. Not only does it allow parents to work, but it also really lays the educational and social emotional foundation for young children. So as an organization that's really focused on poverty issues, we think that this should be really top of mind for people. But we also would say that this is not just an issue for families. This is an issue for all New Yorkers. If we can't have parents that can go to work, it's bad for our tax base, it's bad for the workforce, and it's bad for the vitality of New York City.
Now, you touched on something that I thought was interesting. You mentioned COVID-19. How did COVID-19 affect the childcare system? Because obviously when we think COVID, we just think healthcare. So how did it affect childcare in New York?
So COVID-19 just disrupted everything. So when the city closed down, many of the childcare centers and childcare sites closed down as well. We saw workers that left the field, and many of them did not come back. And many of the doors to those childcare sites really did not open. So, thousands of workers leaving the system altogether. So really making this challenge of being able to find childcare even worse. But I think that there were also some real positive sides. So first of all, it made people aware of this issue. So something that was maybe invisible before the pandemic, we were all paying attention to the fact that women were leaving the workforce because they had to care for their child. We saw maybe a Zoom where there'd be like a child running in the background. So, it became very visible to people, the challenges of childcare. And then there were these really historic investments in the childcare system. So first coming from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act. And it's short-term funding, but it was historic. And then New York State took a really big step and committed $7 billion to childcare to help build the system here.
Now, what are some key factors contributing to the high cost of childcare in New York City? I think if you're not a parent, it's hard to like visualize like why is it so expensive? So can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, so people in New York are getting hit from every direction right now with inflation. The cost of food is rising, the cost of rent is rising, utilities, just across the board. And this is affecting childcare centers as well. The majority of childcare sites are actually home-based sites. So a lot of those providers are kind of being hit with this double whammy of both these increasing costs as well as potentially the rent going up. But we've also seen that there's a huge demand for workers. And so, childcare workers who've been historically just grossly underpaid have been leaving the workforce or leaving the childcare workforce and going to other jobs. And so salaries have been going up in the profession, and that's increasing costs as well. But I just want to underscore that I don't view that as totally a bad thing, that we have people who are getting paid more, because these are the people who are caring for our youngest children and laying that foundation. So, paying them fair wages for their work is really an important thing.
Now, how is this, concern affecting low-income families in New York City specifically? Just because, I'm sure in most cases, low-income people kind of face the brunt of any, challenges that the city faces. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the federal government defines childcare affordability as paying no more than 7% of your income on childcare. And by that measure, more than half of New Yorkers could not afford childcare, and that's across all income levels. So we see this hitting families that are low income even more. If they're not getting some sort of government support or subsidy, it's very difficult for them to manage with childcare. And you can imagine that this is even more pressing for single parents who, need to be able to provide for their family, and then taking so much of their income up to pay for childcare makes it very challenging.
That kind of goes into my next question. How does the burden of childcare expenses impact, a parent's ability to work and also provide for their families?
Yeah, so that's a great and important question. So, if you don't have childcare, it just makes it very difficult to work in general. Robinhood recently put out a report, a poverty tracker report that we did in partnership with Columbia University, where we have this survey where we survey New Yorkers over time to better understand the challenges that they're facing. And we recently put out a report on the city's free 3K program, which of course allows families to have childcare for free and educational opportunities for their children for free. And when the program was rolling out, they rolled it out in some neighborhoods first, with prioritizing lower income neighborhoods. And what we saw was that in the neighborhoods where they rolled out the 3K program first, more of those parents, mothers in particular, were entering the workforce, and that more of them were working full time. And this persisted even past the 3K program. Even as their children got older, they were working at higher rates and working more full time. They were also seeing significant savings. They were spending $450 less per month on childcare. So that's money that they can be spending on rent, on food, on books, on all of the sorts of other expenses that they're really experiencing right now. So I think you can see that when programs like this, when we make those programs available, that there can really be benefits for both parents and children.
Now, I want to talk about the Child Care Quality and Innovation Initiative. Can you say, what is the main goal of this initiative?
Yeah, so we created a partnership with the City of New York. It's a $100 million initiative trying to address all of these issues. So we're looking at how we can help expand affordable, high-quality childcare to New Yorkers. And really, we have a few areas of focus for us. So one is that we're really hoping to get people connected to childcare, especially in higher poverty neighborhoods or neighborhoods where they might be considered childcare deserts. We also want to streamline this process because it's been pretty cumbersome for people to actually access government support for some of these services. So I'm really working with this city to streamline that process and make sure people are accessing those vouchers. And then, of course, we want to be able to make the system more higher quality childcare in general. And so we're looking at supporting the workforce, looking at professional development, looking at other avenues to increase the quality of childcare overall.
And I understand that Robinhood just announced 3 new grants to help expand the city's child care voucher program. Can you provide more details about this effort? And you talked about accessibility. How can families access this?
Yeah, so very exciting. We just made our first wave of grants totaling about $3 million in partnership with the city's Administration for Children's Services. And it's really focused on these vouchers, which reduce the cost for families. So they're paying no more than 1% of their income on childcare. And there's a few things that we're doing. So the first thing is looking at customer service, because people have questions. They want to be able to call, be able to get answers. So we're helping the city with the customer service aspect. We're also looking at why sometimes families get vouchers, but they don't end up using them. So is this a mismatch between the hours that childcare is open? Is it not available in their neighborhood? So we're really trying to better understand that. But then the biggest piece is really doing outreach and trying to connect families and enroll them in these vouchers. And so we are prioritizing Northern Manhattan and the Bronx to start. And so that will be rolling out in the coming months.
Now, I also want to highlight the fact that you mentioned that it's high quality and affordable, childcare options. And I think this is so important because whenever we're talking about things that are, I guess, free or, things that are supposed to help people, people often have like this idea in their mind that it's not going to be the best. But, it seems that, high quality is very important, especially when we're dealing with kids. So can you talk about the importance of making sure that, these parents are, investing into something that, will help their child in the long run. And it's not something that's just, oh, this is just here for you, go back to work.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that parents have choice when it comes to childcare. So for some people, it's that they want to have childcare close to home. Some people, they want to have childcare close to work. In other cases, they're really focused on the types of activities that might be in childcare. So I think what we're really focused on is getting people vouchers that gives people those options and that they can choose what works best for them and their family. But yeah, underscoring quality and making sure that it's setting children up for educational success in the future is really important.
Now, how can people or other organizations get involved or support Robin Hood's initiatives to improve the childcare system?
Yeah, well, people can consider supporting Robin Hood or any of the amazing community partners we work with. You can find all of those on our website at robinhood.org. But this is a really big issue, and it can't be just one organization or just Robin Hood or even the city working on these issues. We need more public and government support. So having people reach out to their congressperson and advocating for more money and more support for childcare, especially for younger children under the age of 3.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, because I didn't even think about like the political aspect of this. Why is it important to get that support, from our politicians?
Yeah, I mean, this is an important issue. I would say it's a defining issue for our city. If people can't live and work in our city because they can't afford it, then it has lasting impacts on the vitality of the city overall.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing, so much information about this, especially, I'm sure we have viewers who don't have children yet. So, I think it's just still interesting to learn about, all the ways our city is being impacted by everything, kind of being expensive. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
To learn more about Robin Hood's Childcare Quality and Innovation Initiative, please go to their website at www.robinhood.org. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Open right after this.
Most hiring algorithms would scream me out.
Some bosses couldn't see me as a leader.
I've run this place for 20 years, but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper.
I've been running code as long as I've been able to reach a keyboard.
This is what I do. It's second nature for me, coordinating 100 details at once.
It's the way my mind works. I have a very mechanical brain.
I sold them on my skills.
You gotta be so good they can't ignore you.
My magic is
analytics and empathy. That's how getting clients. You have to have the confidence in yourself to show up and defy the odds.
I am more than who I am on paper.
I never got a college degree. And today, I'm the CEO of my own company. People want to tell me I'm one in a million, when actually I'm one of millions. The stars are all around us. It's time for them to shine.
Attacks against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are on the rise.
My simple solution to the problem was remove people from the scene and help them feel safer. In terms of the hate crimes, I think there is so much more work to be done. We really need to come together and tackle this issue as a community.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Thanks for hearing me out, bro.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
Welcome back. Many New Yorkers depend on public transportation, but due to frequent price increases and lengthy commutes, these services can be unreliable. The Equitable Commute Project aims to create a city where e-bikes are a cost-effective, secure, and eco-friendly alternative for more residents. Joining me to discuss their programs and the future of e-bikes in New York City is Sustainable Mobility Consultant at ECP, Melinda Hanson. Melinda, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the Equitable Commute Project and basically how it started? I know that you are one of the co-founders. So can you just talk a little bit more about that experience?
Yep, absolutely. So we launched the ECP with the goal of improving economic access through improving the financial accessibility of sustainable transportation. There's obviously been a lot of focus in recent years on electric cars, but many New Yorkers don't have cars. And e-bikes have emerged over the past several years as an excellent and reliable and convenient and affordable form of transportation. So we launched during the pandemic when a lot of New Yorkers a lot of frontline New Yorkers were still needing to commute into the office. Many were very scared about being on subways. And we looked around our city and broader cities across the globe and saw that many who could afford it were turning to e-bikes. E-bikes were providing an accessible and convenient and often faster way of getting around. And we wanted to make sure that all New Yorkers could access high quality e-bikes.
Now, I understand that you have an e-bike trade-in program. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how can people get involved?
Yes, absolutely. So there has been a huge issue with battery fires across New York City. There's been almost 200 fires caused by lithium-ion batteries this year alone. And that is not a problem with e-bikes as a technology. It's a problem with low quality devices coming into our city. And a lot of folks who rely on e-bikes to earn a living have been stuck with those devices, namely our city's delivery workers, of which there are an estimated 65,000 who make deliveries for apps such as Uber and DoorDash, Instacart, and others. So our trade-in program was launched to try and help those folks to afford high quality UL 2849 certified e-bikes. And since they'd already invested in these low quality devices without knowing it, we wanted to make sure that we subsidized the purchase of the safer bikes to give them even more of a reason to come in and exchange.
Now, what types of e-bikes are eligible for trade-in and what happens to the traded-in vehicles?
So there's a category called micromobility, which encompasses electric bikes, which look like your sort of traditional analog bike, but have some electric kick assist to it. There's your electric mopeds that look like Vespas, and you see people using those. And there's electric scooters, which are the stand-up devices similar to what your kid may have, again, with an electric assist. Any of those are eligible for our program. And if you bring one of those into exchange, we will give you a UL 2849 certified, very high quality e-bike with 2 batteries to make sure we can do away with any kind of range anxiety.
Okay, that's cool. So I want to also talk about, you said scooters. That's is that part of the e-bike community? Because I think that's really interesting. I wasn't thinking that was part of it.
Yeah, I mean, micromobility is sort of a blanket term that includes scooters. It includes those hoverboards, those scary looking things you see people, riding around on, the electric skateboards and all kinds of things. But what we've really seen emerge as a very reliable transportation option for New Yorkers and for city dwellers in particular are really the e-bikes and the e-mopeds.
Now, New York City just enforced a new law that requires all e-bikes sold to be certified and meet a specific safety standard known as UL 2849, as you mentioned. Could you elaborate on what this certification entails and its significance?
Absolutely, yeah. So UL stands for Underwriters Laboratory, and they are a standard writing body that gets these groups of experts together, decides what is required to maximize fire safety and reliability and other features that you would want in any consumer appliance. and then sets the design standards that anyone who achieves that needs to meet. So UL 2849 is a standard that the city government in New York City, as well as the fire department, have adopted and verified that any device that meets that standard is going to be fire safe and is going to be something reliable and safe for you to be riding around. Now, because this is an emerging industry, there's been a lot of issues with devices that have not met any standardization, and that's where we've seen the problem. So if you are in the market for an e-bike or an e-moped or an e-scooter, you want to make sure you're looking for the UL 2849 certification.
Now, when it comes to e-bikes as a transportation method, what are some benefits they bring to users, but also to the environment?
Yeah, the biggest benefit that we find for New Yorkers is convenience and time savings. So even though New York City has an amazing public transportation system, 1 million New Yorkers live in transit deserts. They have very long commutes. They have to walk long distances to access the train, or they have to, buy a car that they may or may not be able to afford. So one of the biggest benefits that we see for New Yorkers is travel time savings, somewhere between 30 minutes and 1 hour each day. That folks who have been involved in the program are getting back to spend time with their families, to just relax, go out to dinner, to do something other than transporting yourself to and from work. So that's a huge benefit. The other benefit is, of course, traffic congestion reduction. New Yorkers are often fighting over space, but if you see an e-bike or a bike lane going into your street, that's actually great for you and your commute. If we get more people onto bikes, it's an extremely efficient form of transportation, and that's great for overall traffic congestion. And finally, from a sustainability perspective, e-bikes are the most efficient form of motorized transportation that exists today. They're more efficient even than our subways. They're more efficient than our buses. And they have very, very few emissions. And so as we are trying to fight the climate crisis, we have a long way to go. E-bikes are one of the most promising technologies for trying to reduce emissions.
And I'm curious to know, are they, and if you don't know, this is fine, but are they also safer for, like, I guess, pedestrians as well as, people that are actually on the street? I'm curious to know if that's, something that you guys found out.
Yeah, so this is a very hot topic right now. There's a difference. A lot of people group these things into the same category, but there's a difference between an electric bike and an electric moped. An electric moped, the ones that look like a Vespa, you need to have a driver's license. You need to have registration for the vehicle. You need to have a license plate on the vehicle. So those are treated the same as cars, and all of the safety requirements and licensing is the same. So those are more dangerous. They do go faster. If people are breaking the rules on those, the consequences are high, like they are with cars. E-bikes is a very specific category that's very clearly defined. The bikes themselves, even though they have this pedal assist, which helps you, to keep up, with cars in certain situations, the speed cap typically for these e-bikes is only about 20, maybe 25 miles per hour. The majority of them are pedal assist, so you have to pedal to get that extra boost. And that's a speed that's actually about the same as someone could achieve on a regular bicycle.
Now, what is the potential impact of expanding access to e-bikes in New York City, particularly here in the Bronx?
So as I mentioned before, the issue with transit deserts is huge. And one thing that we have found from our program is that e-bikes are amazing because they are more convenient than a car in that you can get where you want to go, A to B, door to door, as quickly as possible. But they're less expensive even than the bus. And so when we think about how we can improve people's lives, give them a little bit of exercise in their daily life, expand economic opportunity, give them more time for free time, enjoying time with their families, it's hard to think of a better tool than an e-bike.
Now, this sounds really cool, but what would you say to somebody who's like a little bit nervous about, kind of being on an e-bike? So many New Yorkers are just so used to like hopping on a bus or the train. So what do you say to somebody who's like really, really new to this?
Yeah, it is completely rational to be a little bit scared. It's our streets have for decades and decades been designed really only to invite car-based transportation. But that's rapidly changing. And what we've seen in cities across the globe, cities that are very similar to New York City, like London, like Paris, is that if you build connected and protected infrastructure, people will ride. And the goal really of that infrastructure is to provide a physical barrier. So you have, little bollards, like those little sticks that you see popping up off the ground, or a curb, or something else that actually provides a physical separation between where the bikes are going and where the cars are. And that's really the secret. And this administration, the city government really deserves a lot of credit for rapidly expanding that infrastructure.
Now, besides the e-bike trade-in program, what are some other programs and initiatives offered by the Equitable Commute Project?
So the ECP is a coalition of 7 New York City-based organizations. We work across academia, nonprofit, and community banks. And so the initiative I would love to highlight in addition is one by Bronx-based Spring Bank. They're a partner of the ECP. They've launched the Go Green Cycle Loan. One of the first things that we discovered is that it's a lot easier for many people with little to no credit history to access a potentially predatory tens of thousands of dollars car loan than it is for them to access a $1,000 loan, which is typically what it would take for them to bridge the gap and be able to afford an e-bike. So Spring Bank, in partnership with the ECP, launched this Go Green Cycle Loan, and it's an excellent way to make sure people can have financial access at the same time build a positive credit history.
Now, I'm actually really glad that you brought that up because I think for a lot of people, $290 sounds cheaper initially, right? How do you address the idea of like, oh, maybe I can't afford an e-bike, or maybe this just isn't accessible to me? How do you address that concern?
Yeah, so we found that through if you have a loan, you have insurance, you have some basic gear for having an e-bike, and you need to do some sort of standard maintenance as well as charging. The cost for owning an e-bike is somewhere between $300 and $500 a year. And that includes, it sort of depends on what your loan situation is, but it's really affordable. And that's compared to new numbers that are coming out with someone for a car, and not even an electric car. The average cost of car ownership these days is $12,000 a year. Getting a bus pass, a metro pass in New York, right, is something like it's over $1,000 a year. And so when you look across the board, this is an affordable transportation option. And for many people, it won't be your sole option, but it's such a wonderful complement to the public transit that we have here.
Now, looking ahead, what are other future plans or goals for promoting e-bike adoption in New York City?
So we want to continue working with the city. The city has been very active on this issue. They've recognized that e-bikes are an equity issue and it's an equitable climate solution and one of the few. So we're working with the city to continue advancing policies similar to our trade-in program. The city is introducing a bill to try and expand that program, make it more accessible to even more folks. We're advocating for subsidies at the state level because we already have tons of subsidies available for folks wanting to get electric cars, so make a similar kind of subsidy available for electric bikes. And at the same time, this infrastructure question that we discussed earlier, we need more voices at the table, setting what that infrastructure looks like and making sure that it serves the needs of all communities.
Now, how can individuals or organizations, because you mentioned that you work with 7 other organizations, so how can an organization get involved or an individual get involved?
Yeah, so one excellent way is to join one of our coalition members is Transportation Alternatives. They're very, very active on road safety, on pedestrian and bicycling advocacy and public space across the city. They are a membership-based organization, so they're excellent to get involved in. The other one is to follow the Equitable Commute Project on social media. We're trying to be very active and share our learnings from this whole experience because it's an area that people are increasingly interested in.
Well, Melinda, thank you so much for joining us and having this really interesting conversation. I feel like I'm going to look up e-bikes after this. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Don't forget, if you need help with trading in your e-bike or if you just want to find out more about the organization, please go to their website at www.equitablecommute.org. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Files Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Jaime on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you.